My name is David. Welcome to week 23 of 52 Churches in 52 Weeks. If you're new here, consider liking and subscribing to stay up to date with this ongoing church pilgrimage. Also, you can check out Instagram for a rolling list of all the church visits. And also, if you'd like to check out the first 52 churches in 52 weeks, there's a book on Amazon. I'll leave information below. So for this week, I went to Holy Hill, which is in the back over here. And Holy Hill is a minor basilica and shrine outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Right now it's the beginning of October, so a lot of leaves are changing. Holy Hill is a huge tourist destination around this time of year, just due to the beauty of the leaves changing and this huge building that is almost like popping out of the hill like a beacon when it comes to the Catholic faith. So in the first 52 churches in 52 weeks, I visited a total of 8 different Catholic churches. And I really couldn't understand why I kept coming back to the Catholic churches. To start 52 and 52, one of the many reasons that I started the project in the first place is I had a really good buddy and a lot of coworkers that had grown up in the Catholic faith and had become just full-blown atheists. And I want to understand why. So I went to one of my buddy's Catholic churches that he grew up in, and what I found, and I just felt completely out of place. No one greeted me walking in. It was so quiet and somber. It was almost like a morgue to me for the first time visiting. And the sermon was probably one of the worst I ever heard, just because it was more about preparing for your funeral, so that way you wouldn't cause family friction, and how it'd be a bad idea to request to play Johnny Cash for your funeral. And at the end of the sermon, the father mentioned it's like he had been reassigned to go to a different parish, and there was no reaction at all. And after that, I just kept scratching my head where it's like I don't understand the Catholic faith. Like, part of it I do, but then there were certain rituals and traditions that I just didn't get. But there was a beauty to it. There was a certain mystery to me as a lifetime Protestant, where it's like, okay, what is here? What can I take away from the Catholic Church that can help enhance my faith, rather than me coming in with a certain bias and just judging and dismissing it as a whole? So I've had a few requests to visit a Catholic church. I visited the Cross in the Woods, which was a Catholic shrine, but that was more of a healing service. I also did the St. Louis Abbey. That is more of a monk monastery. This is the first time I'm going in this new 52 and 52 to just a traditional, typical Catholic church service. So I already made the church visit, but I want to show you a couple sights and sounds inside, and I'll share some thoughts in just a minute. So it's been several days since I visited Holy Hill, and this video's been a long time in the making. I've wanted to do a Catholic video for a very long time, but I realized it's very difficult to do this in a way that removes certain biases when you grew up as a lifetime Protestant. So when I was growing up, I associated the Catholic faith with indulgences, 95 Theses, praying to Mary when you shouldn't. These are things that I just grew up on. and I never was taught how the Catholic faith helped when it came to building hospitals or schools, orphanages, or helping the poor. It was always in a very negative light. So with doing these videos, I don't want to be taking steeples off churches and using it as sword fighting between faiths and denominations. I don't think that helps. I want to be building bridges instead of burning them. And I think with this video, I'm going to have some critical aspects. I know it. But at the same time, I'm going to try and walk a fine line. I may have some biases come out, especially related to doctrines. But I want to try and do this in a way that is more from the view as a newcomer, walking in off the street, as opposed to where I grew up with and the certain biases that I had from that. So funny thing, when I first got there, I got there about 30 minutes early before the start of Mass. So I thought I had plenty of time. And when you go to Holy Hill, one of the first things that you're curious about is the Scenic Tower. So at the very bottom, they show you a sign that says it's 178 steps. So good luck. And I got up to a certain extent of this portion of the building, and I found out real quick, you do not want to go up the Scenic Tower in the middle of fall on a weekend. It's just an absolute disaster. So it was like a traffic jam of people from a vertical standpoint with all these stairs. So people were stuck on the steps trying to get up and people trying to get down. I'm thinking they should put like a max capacity thing on this, because between the 178 steps, I want to say there had to be at least 100 people, if not more, that were trying to go up to the very top to get some scenic pictures overlooking with all the leaves changing. So it's just really strange. By the time I finally got off the Scenic Tower and walked in for Mass, it had already started. And with this video, I think what I'll do is I'll start off with just some of the positives that I appreciate about the Catholic faith. And when you walk in, you just really appreciate the humbleness, the respect for Jesus Christ, for dying for our sins. I just don't get that with many churches. One other thing that I really appreciate is action behind your faith. So for instance, the use of kneelers. When I did this the first time in the first 52 and 52, you'd have Catholics pull out these kneelers from the pews, get down on their knees and pray. I never did that. Like, I was just in my Protestant prayer stance of just sitting in the pew and just praying in my lap pretty much. But after I've visited the Amish Mennonite church, where it's like you actually had to get down on your knees on the ground, turn around and pray on the pew, it was such a humbling experience to feel a prayer like that. Seventh-day Adventists kind of did the same thing. So now with the Catholic faith, I'm like, whatever, I can do the kneelers. But one thing that I also really appreciate with that action is the use of candles. So I've gone to a Thais prayer service, I think it's called. And what they do is they light a candle, and it's almost like your essence is kind of like praying into the candle. And you have it in your hand. It's like your prayer is in your hand, and you're giving it to the cross. You place it in front of Jesus Christ dying on the cross. And there's something about that action, something about that metaphor, something about that representation of the prayer being laid at Jesus's feet that really just resonates. And it just makes it really, really come alive. And I think that's something that's lost in other type of churches. The last thing that I really appreciate is the actual church architecture and the building itself. You don't really see a whole lot of these basilicas or cathedrals or even shrines for that matter, being built nowadays. And you can understand why, because there's so much criticism about these rich churches building all these rich monuments almost to themselves. But there's a certain beauty with it, because when you're walking in, you see the architecture. It is designed with, especially Gothic architecture, where you have these things kind of like pointed up to the heavens. And the entire building is structured that way too. And the way that the light coming in from stained glass windows, when that kind of merges and ricochets against the darkness inside these buildings and these churches, there's something to be said about that, especially when it comes to Jesus Christ being the light in the darkness in the world. So again, that's something that's being lost as we go more for a more modern, more conventional, more contemporary type of church nowadays. I think my biggest issue is when it comes to closed communion. And I mentioned this with one of my Lutheran videos, and this is one of the ones that always kind of ties me up, because with closed communion, I want the body and blood of Christ. I want the Lord's Supper. And the father kind of gave warning that if you're not a practicing Catholic, you can come up, you can do this, or you can just sit back. And when I visited my first ever Catholic church, I just remember I stayed back and I got so many stares from people that were going up. Like, who is this guy? Like, he's not Catholic, so what's he doing here? That's the feeling, the paranoid feeling that I got doing it the first time. And it really kind of makes me wonder, because if you're a first-time visitor, like, you are welcomed to go to church. You're welcomed into someone's home, God's home. But then when it comes to dinner time, when it comes to sitting at the Lord's table, suddenly you're disinvited. So it's like, why are you inviting me into your home, but you deny me dinner? And like, part of me is almost like, if I do go to another Catholic church again, it's almost like I want to kind of brown paper bag it and just bring in my own elements to do communion by myself. Because like, when it comes to communion, like, that is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That is his body and blood that he gave for us. Like, I know with my faith, I am not going to be judged by Christ due to a lack of faith. So why does the church have to judge it that way? So that's been always something that I've struggled with. One thing that I did find very admirable about this particular church is there was a lot of people there. And I was like, how are they going to do communion with all these people? This is going to take forever. But like the Catholic faith, like they know how to do the Eucharist. They know how to do communion. Like, it's a well-oiled machine. So when they got it ready to go, like, they split it up into like 4 quadrants based off the seating of the church. So they had 4 different stations with 4 different people giving out the wafers and then the wine. And it was just bada bing, bada boom. It was done in 5 minutes or less. Like, I've seen other type of churches that are kind of new trying to do communion, and it just becomes this absolute mess, and it just takes forever, and there's no organization. Here, it's like they know what they're doing. It just, I guess, like with the Catholic faith, if they've been doing the church longer than anybody else, it's like, I'm sure they learned a thing or two. I guess the last thing that I'll mention is when it comes to basilicas, cathedrals, parishes that I visited, I rarely ever get greeted, not at the door, not walking in. It's something that when you don't get a greeting, you just feel like a stranger. And like, not many Protestant churches, like a lot of Protestant churches, like almost everyone that I visited, they always have someone at the door. They have someone that welcomes you in as you walk into the main area, the main worship center for the church, but not so much when it comes to Catholic churches. Here, I was late. I wasn't expecting it, but like, you still have an opportunity when they do the peace be with you. And the strange thing is, when they did the peace be with you, I said hi and peace be with you to a few people, but I noticed 2 couples, like, they just said peace be with you to each other, hugged each other, and they didn't acknowledge anybody else around them. So I'm like, how do you preach? How do you be disciples of all nations if you don't acknowledge anybody within your own church around you? And I think there's one thing that I took away from that is, like, I've looked in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, And I just recently saw that Book of Mormon Broadway musical, and it's the missionaries in it are just a little too much. Hey-oh, you gotta read the Book of Mormon, eternal life. Like there's a lot of excitement from that. Protestants, there's still that Great Commission, but it's just not as gung ho. When it comes to the Catholic faith, it's just not as strong. It's just very dry, and it's just kind of like keep to myself. It's almost kind of like children, like LDS. It's just they're young, 200 years old religion. Protestants 500 years, like they're a little bit more seasoned. Catholics are like, we know what we're doing. Will Pope Francis take a look at this video and consider some of the recommendations I had that might improve and enhance the Catholic Church? Probably not. But if you are curious about different type of churches, how they treat newcomers and what to expect, maybe that'll help a little bit in terms of what you might see. So as always, if you appreciate the video, hit the like button and subscribe. If you want to read about all my Catholic visits from the first 52 churches in 52 weeks, you can check it on Amazon. Links are below. But until next time, hope you have a good one.